Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the functional diagnostic nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 393 of the Health Detective Podcast. I got two quick announcements, and then we will get right into our interview with our guest today. It's going to be an interesting one for sure. So one, if you're watching this live or shortly after it was live and you're bored on a Wednesday tomorrow and you want to join a stress and hormones workshop, because that's what people who watch our type of show like to do on a Wednesday afternoon, we would love to invite you to our stress and hormones workshop tomorrow. It's actually free for podcast listeners. If you saw it on like a paid ad, you would have had to pay, I think, about 11 or 12 bucks to get into this, but you can join us there at fdntraining.com/SH25, like stress and hormones 25. That's fdntraining.com/SH25. And if you use that same code at checkout, SH25, you can get your ticket for free. So it will not automatically be for free. It will go to free once you put that code in. And that will be with myself and Paula Reed, who you guys really want to hear from if you're nerding out about hormones. I'll just be introing more or less. So she will be going over some labs, going over kind of some deeper topics about hormones, HPA axis dysfunction. We always say if you're already an FDN graduate or trainee, you're more than welcome to come, but we promise you we're not gatekeeping this information from you guys. You're so funny. You always like come on our marketing efforts and are like, oh my God, I got to learn this stuff. It's like, you are learning this in the course. We promise we will teach you this. This is more for the public so that they can figure out if they would like to learn more and do something like the FDN program eventually. The other quick announcement is we are rapidly filling up. I'm more worried about the hotel than I am tickets. So if you guys would like to join us for an East Coast FDN conference, it is going down Friday, February 28th and Saturday, March 1st, 2025 in beautiful Miami, Florida. I will admit Miami's not always my vibe. It is definitely my vibe in late February and early March. All of a sudden, it becomes the best place on earth when there's no hurricanes and it's 80 degrees and sunny when you've been like freezing and super pale and all that stuff. So we would love to see you there. Since we are the largest sponsor of the event, Sandy Martin has been nice enough, she's the founder there, to give us 50% off tickets. So if you go to biohackerexpo.com and then use the code HDP at checkout, that'll give you 50% off. We're expecting 80 to 100 FDNs there. Myself, Reed Davis, Elizabeth Gaines will be there, and we're finalizing some other fun staff members that will be there as well. So get your tickets while you can. Again, the tickets should be the easier part. It's the hotel that will definitely sell out. And Airbnbs in Miami are not necessarily the cheapest thing in the world. So we would love to see you guys there. And thanks for listening to my announcements today. I try to do good. I'm under 4 minutes here. Let's get to our guest and talk about this pretty cool thing, in my opinion. So I always... Well, let me do the bio first, and I'll do my prefacing here. So Chris is a published author, host of the Uncovering the Secrets to Longevity Health Summit, podcast host, and patent holder with a surprising twist. He's not just a visionary scientist, but also a master of comedy improv. Let's see if that's true today. Chris is the founder and chief scientist at MyVitalC, where he manufactures a Nobel Prize-winning molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result in history, a full 90% extension in life. So we're going to get to that. It's a big claim, but we're going to get to that. He is the intersection where science meets laughter, and his life's mission is to help people live longer, healthier, happier, pain-free lives with science. He just had Reed Davis, the founder of FDN, on the show the other, I think not that long ago, and then Reed actually connected Chris and I. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Detective Ed, I am glad to be connected with you, and I'm excited. I just learned something new. I'm going to get to meet you real soon because I'm actually going to be at the Biohacker Expo as well.
Okay. Oh, nice. All right. That's awesome. You know what? Let's talk real quick afterwards, because we have like a mix and mingle night for our FDNs. And if you want to come, you're more than welcome, obviously. We'd love to have you there. And then
yeah, that'd be very cool.
Okay, so let's just kind of jump right into the claim side. And I think that's because it's going to allow us to unravel the story. Normally, I start the show with like, when did the person's health issues start, XYZ. But I think people are clicking for a specific reason. And I would like to know, how did you even find this research? How did you come across this? Because again, they're big claims. A 90% extension in life sounds phenomenal, but I got to watch some of your stuff. Reed is the biggest anti-snake oil person you can imagine. So just because it's a big claim doesn't mean that it's BS. And Chris was awesome on the phone when I talked to him. He's like, no, challenge me. Come in with a little bit of skepticism. He's like, that's what I want to do. So how did you even come across these studies and information?
Yeah, really, I would ask that you come to me with the skepticism that I had as this kind of evolved for me. And I'm going to go all the way back and really talk about the molecule. And I'm actually working from home today. I live in Houston. We got 2.5 inches of snow today, so the city shut down. And I know there are people up north who are like, it doesn't, like 2.5 inches, that's nothing. Why? We don't have a single snowplow in the city of Houston. That might give you some perspective on how crazy things are. So I'm working from the home. So I have my model, which also serves a secondary purpose, which is it's my dog's toy. We throw this for my dog. This is a model of the molecule that was discovered in 1985 right here in Houston. That's where we're based, as I mentioned, at Rice University. And the three scientists who discovered this molecule won the Nobel Prize in 1996. So a short 11 years from discovering to being awarded the Nobel Prize. My business partner and I started manufacturing the molecule in 1991. So 5 years before the Nobel Prize was awarded. This is really a situation of being in the right place at the right time. I was going to school. My business partner had the opportunity, what was suggested to him actually by one of his professors, that he should start this company. He comes from an entrepreneurial background, and so he was off and running. They recruited me to help build the equipment to actually manufacture the molecule. And the molecule is 60 carbon atoms. We call it ESS 60, but it's 60 carbon atoms in the shape of a soccer ball, right? This dog toy is in the shape of a soccer ball. If you're listening, just imagine a soccer ball where the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. So again, a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. Discovered in 85, Nobel Prize in 96. The molecule is absolutely amazing. It performs as well or better than the current best material in almost every application. So it makes better inks, better tires, better batteries, better photocells. And this is often when people get uncomfortable. It's like, we're on a health show. Like you just said, ink, battery, tires, and photocells. That makes me a little bit nervous. The story gets a little worse first. One of these shapes on the exterior of the soccer ball shaped molecule, ESS60 molecule, is the same shape as benzene. Now, benzene is ubiquitous in our society. We don't have modern society without it. Imagine all the plastics that are in your field of view gone, because benzene is the core molecule in those. Many detergents, many medicines, aspirin's core molecule is benzene. But the problem with benzene is when it's all by itself, it's actually known to be toxic and known to be a carcinogen. So because that shape is on the exterior of this ESS60 molecule, they thought it would be toxic. They put it in a toxicity study. Instead of being toxic, the test subject that they gave it to, in this case, it was Wistar rats, lived 90% longer than the control group. And that is the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, and kind of changed my trajectory from being a happy-go-lucky carbon nanomaterial scientist, if there is such a thing, that definitely is me, to getting into the health space. And now all this story is in my book, Live Longer and Better. I ended up starting the podcast, Live Beyond the Norms. I did that longevity summit. So I'm deeply entrenched in now health and longevity, with a focus, of course, on this molecule that I've been manufacturing for 33 years.
Okay, thank you so much for not only explaining this, but for saying one thing. Because I admit, in the back of my head, I was going to wait. I'm like, is he going to say this or is he not going to say it? And you're already past that, because it's important to mention that this is not done in humans. Now, that doesn't mean there's not validity, because I don't think people realize the amount of stuff that's not done in humans that they share on their Facebook every single day, even as functional health coaches. By the way, I'm an adamant believer in intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, all that stuff. Guys, most of that has not been done in humans yet. That's not really where we're at with this. So understand that there's plenty of things that I practice and believe in that I can't 100% prove in human studies. And there's also practicality side to this? You know what I mean? It's kind of, well, that's a whole separate thing, right? I'm not the researcher myself per se. I'm the studier, but not the researcher. So I appreciate that you
If
mentioned
you
this.
start talking practicality with this longevity summit, just for frame of reference, if the average human lived 90% longer, the average human would live to 152. And most people, when they hear that, think, oh, that's the oldest person. No, that's the average person. There's a bell curve around that 152 with people living a lot longer. So that longevity study, you are exactly right, will never happen.
Well, and that's what I want to ask, because I don't want to put claims in your mouth. Like, when we see this happening in a rat model, I get excited about that. And I do think there's significance for humans. Do you think it's fair to say that it would be, like, just as a guess, not as a claim, but would it be similar? Do we really think people are going to be living to 150 if they're taking this stuff? Are you going to live to 150, or is there something in between there that makes more sense?
Yeah, I think there's something in between there, right? So not only is this a rat, and there are some differences, and I'll talk about that in a second. There's also a rat bred for a very specific thing, and I'll tell you about that here. So a typical Wistar rat lives out to 32 months and has a known amount of tumor mass in its body. The longer it lives, the more tumor mass it has in its body. Even though the MyVitalC rats lived out to 62 months, again, 90% longer than the control group, none of them had any tumors. So this rat is bred to actually have tumors. And so clearly that could play a role in this extension of life. And that wouldn't necessarily apply to the standard human who is not bred to grow tumors, right? But it is still the longest longevity experimental result in history. Now we start diving into, well, the first group of people who were even interested in this was this wacky, crazy group called biohackers. And I can say that now because I am a biohacker now. From the very beginning, we were having phone calls where they were calling us and saying, hey, how much of this should I consume? And this is way back in really, that study came out in mid-2012, mid-2013. We started getting those wacky phone calls, and my business partner and I, conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists, were like, wait a minute, you're asking us how much of that stuff that we sell to researchers to put into ink, batteries, tires, and photocells, how much should you consume? And we said like zero. We actually put not for human consumption on our labeling. Now, let me be clear. The data in the literature was clear that it was safe. We were just ultra conservative scientists. Now, this changed the conversations we were having with people, but people were still, biohackers were still calling us 2 to 3 times a week and saying, hey, my knee pain is gone. And we were like, you mean the knee pain of your rat, right? Because it literally says not for human consumption on the labeling. And he's like, yeah. If my rat weighed 275 pounds, how much should my rat be taking on a daily basis? That happened until the latter part of 2017. A guy with a big YouTube following started sharing all the benefits he was getting, taking it on a daily basis. And then our phone went from ringing 2 to 3 times a week to actually 10 times a day. My business partner, it was an entrepreneurial opportunity outside of our recognition that really kind of landed our lap. And then we asked ourselves 2 questions. We asked the first question, which is a moral question. Are we comfortable selling it? I take it. My wife takes it. Everybody on our team takes it. By the way, it's not a requirement to work on our team to take it, that you have to take it. And then the next is the legal. You've got the FDA and the FTC, and that's really, you got to cross the T's and dot the I's there. Let me talk just a little bit about rats. When this first happened and when I was starting to get into the literature, dig into the literature, one of the things that I wanted to understand is what happens, like what percentage of things that happen in a rat happen in a human, and what percentage of things that happen in a rat don't happen in a rat, don't happen in a human. So I ended up with this call. My business partner and I share a wall. He was talking to a professor, Professor Kudabek. He's actually out of the University of DePaul, and Kudabek actually takes rat studies and takes them into human trials. And so I took the opportunity, I ran over to my business partner. And I was like, I have this question. What is the number? Like, what percentage of things happen in a rat that happen into a human? And he shared this story. Sorry, it's a little bit long, but it is pretty interesting. He said, most of the time, people who say that what happens in a rat won't happen in a human use this one study as an example. And the study was a morning sickness drug that they gave to rats, didn't see any problems with the rats, moved it into a human trial. And unfortunately, they noticed some deformations in the fetuses of in the human trial and immediately ended the trial. And people say, see, what happens in a rat doesn't happen to a human. And then Professor Paul Dudebeck continued to say, but if you had looked at the original research and if they had looked at the fetuses, they would have noticed the deformities. And so they got it all wrong. And I just share that story because the reality is a lot of things that happen in rats happen in humans. That's why a lot of our initial research for safety is, grounded in rats. And there's more to say on that, but I'll try and keep it to that brief point.
Well, yeah, thank you. And so the rat thing for me is not even a challenging of the validity of this. It's actually the fact that you bring it up first is what matters to me most, because I say this all the time. I'm like a broken record, but I do bring up this example often. The infrared sauna thing. Okay, Chris, I owned a business for 3 years that we had infrared sauna in it. We had people come in every single day that loved it. But there are people down the street from us that were advertising infrared sauna. I'm like, you guys can get sued if you said this kind of stuff. And someone actually caught it. They're talking about fibromyalgia, cancer, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, guys, anecdotal experiences are awesome. And I actually think that they deserve to be shared. It's one of the reasons I'm so happy that I get the privilege of doing this podcast. A lot of FDN is sharing the anecdotes of what people get experience-wise when they utilize these lab tests together in a system that Reed Davis came up with. So I'm all for it. It's just specifying these things and clarifying, rather, these things. Or again, the intermittent fasting thing, which is something I've been practicing for 8 years, actually maybe 9 now. I don't even think people are doing it maliciously. I actually don't. But they speak loosely on major shows sometimes, very big shows, and they forget that the average person, I don't want to say this incorrectly, it's not meant to seem condescending or that the average person's stupid. That's not what I mean. They are ignorant, though. They're ignorant about how science works. They're ignorant about different studies. So they hear, oh, time-restricted eating, increases lifespan. They're like, oh, yeah, that must have been done on grandma and grandpa. And it's like, well, no. And then similarly, another ignorant person might hear that something was done on rats and say, well, oh, that has no validity whatsoever. And I'm like, well, you have no idea how many things you're doing on a daily basis that might have been influenced by rat studies originally. So I try to see in the middle here. I also appreciate you recognizing the fact that something like this can be used in maybe things we wouldn't typically associate with consuming, right? Like an ink or whatever. But I mean, I don't even know that I would worry about that, because if I drink excessive amounts of water, I'm going to die. But if I drink the right amount, it's required for my life. So yeah. I think dose has a huge thing here. I do have a next question, but I have a tendency to say multiple points and then go on to the question without getting the guest's response. So I'll pause for a moment first.
Well, no, I would, there is great research on actual calorie restriction in humans, right? Yeah, sure. Just not intermittent fasting. And then I agree with you. Like, if it's okay to share anecdotes, share them with the right disclaimers. Let people know these are, when I share anecdotes, I often say, listen, you should just assume this isn't going to happen for you. Like, go look at the literature, go visit the website, understand the science, and see if it makes sense for you.
Yes. And sometimes I think to be a good scientist, and I don't even know if I can call myself that without the credentials, so I mean it loosely, but it's like, to be a good scientist, you have to have a mix of deep logical thinking, but you also have to be abstract, right? Look at like the bests of all time. If you look at an Einstein, an Isaac Newton, a Nikola Tesla, these guys are kings of logic, but they're also abstract thinkers. In fact, Einstein was even quoted saying that the intuitive mind is a gift and the logical mind is a faithful servant. So there's something to be said about all of this. And again, our product as FDN professionals, it was done by Reed Davis with 11,000 clients before it was taught to anyone else. Guys, there's no funding here for peer-reviewed research on the FDN system, but the abstract part is, well, all of our foundational labs have validity. 11,000 people are happy because of this. Maybe this is a net positive, right? Yeah. And now you have hundreds of people who've gotten on the show and said something good. So we're experiencers of this ourselves. So just something I wanted to make clear. Let's talk about possible side effects. I think that's always something that people are worried about. Have there been any reported so far? It sounds like at least since 2017, since that whatever big person kind of shared this, someone must be out there consuming this regularly other than just you guys. So that's 8 years, right? I mean, that's a pretty good amount of time.
Yeah.
Has there been any adverse effects?
No, and there's tens of thousands of people who have taken this product on a regular basis. In terms of side effects, we get questions about all sorts of medications. There is no research suggesting that there's any counterindications with any sort of medication out there or supplement or lifestyle. We believe that the toxicity level of the product is similar to the toxicity level of olive oil, which involves drowning. like you will actually throw up the olive oil before you can get enough to be dangerous down you. We think that's the same as ours. Our typical serving is about a teaspoon. And I probably haven't mentioned yet our product is as much of this ESS 60 molecule as we can get to dissolve in a high quality extra virgin olive oil. So what you're taking is a teaspoon of olive oil with that ESS 60 molecule dissolved in it.
Okay, that's almost. Well, I wouldn't say this is identical. I don't want to mislead people, but like I also think about this with colloidal silver, right? If I took way too big of a dose over time, you could. There are a few people that have become blue because of it, but I use colloidal silver for certain purposes. I won't make claims. Let's talk about benefits then, because you already had mentioned that people were calling and saying like, "Hey, it's doing this, that, and the next thing." So we already have a disclaimer on here, but I will say it for you just for being professional. We're not saying that you're making a medical claim. I'm not asking you to make a medical claim. I'm asking you to share stories that people voluntarily shared with you. So I'd love to know some of the effects that they're getting, because I would say there's probably few people that are just going to take it long term, especially like 8 years, just for the sake of taking it. Most of those people that would consistently do it, yeah, they might have this study in the back of their head and be hoping that that's going to do it, but they're probably feeling some type of benefit. So what are some maybe commonly reported benefits?
Yeah, I think, and we can talk about kind of our current theories about method of action, but yeah, let me share some. It would be extremely surprising if there's this ESS 60 molecule that extended the lives of these Wistar rats by 90%, and then you start taking it and there are no health benefits, right? Like that would be very surprising. Our most consistent claim is that people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. Now, better sleep, right? I'm sure that's a foundation of what you guys teach, how you get your clients to sleep better. What are the guidelines that you give them, right? Get to bed at the same time, sleep in a cold room. Well, we know that sleep is good for your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. So if the only thing we did was improve people's sleep, that would be a home run, like an absolute home run. But it does go further than that. And I think this is probably a good time to interject the kind of methods of action that we think are going on. Our first one, as we're really kind of going down this health path, is we thought, hey, it's probably the sleep, and if we can improve sleep. And then your next question is obviously, well, why is it improving sleep? I took a kind of different route and I said, well, what does the medical community typically think about aging? And a lot of the medical community thinks about aging as an oxidation and an inflammation process. And we can tick both of those boxes very carefully, and you'll know that as I proceed. As an antioxidant, there's ad hoc studies out on the web that show us to be 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. There's peer-reviewed published research that shows us to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. So you've got to check, and we'll end up talking about antioxidant here additionally. In terms of anti-inflammatory, you're probably as aware as I am that the FDA says that talking about chronic inflammation is talking about the diseases of inflammation, which are also the diseases of aging. So if you say you do something about inflammation, then you're really saying that you solve arthritis, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, cancer. Obviously, a lot of research needs to be done in order to do that. What we can say is that we do address the inflammation that's brought on by exercise, right? So we've all had a tough workout. We've all walked longer than normal and gotten up and felt that inflammation in our body. We absolutely address that. I'll also add that we fit perfectly in with an anti-inflammatory diet. That's a diet associated with the blue zone people. Those people tend to have reduced incidences of stroke, reduced incidences of heart attack, and they also tend to live longer. And we've got one newer theory, but I'm going to do the same. I'm going to pass it back to you in case you've got some questions.
You know what? I get too excited about these things. So no, I'd like you to keep going, please, because I find this very interesting. Thank you for the.
Okay, excellent. So our current theory, we call it the boss. We say that this ESS60 molecule is the boss buffering oxidative stress system. So we know from peer-reviewed published research that this molecule gets into the mitochondria. That's already amazing. That's really good. We also know from way back in the 90s when it was discovered that it can hold up to 6 negatively charged particles on the exterior of this cage. And those two things cause it, we think, to be the boss. So let's do a quick refresher. Everybody knows mitochondria, powerhouse of every cell. There's between 50 and 5,000 mitochondria in every cell in your body, except for blood cells, which have 0, and brain and neurons, which have 2 million. I think rods and cones also have an elevated amount, but so we're in this range. They are the powerhouse of every cell. And like every powerhouse we're familiar with, they create a negative byproduct. So your car going down the road has exhaust. Your power plant actually has smoke coming out of it. In the case of mitochondria, it's reactive oxygen species. These are the things that, left to their own devices, I think of them like little bumper cars, will run around rusting and causing oxidative stress to everything they bump into. In the mitochondria, you typically have glutathione and melatonin to manage those reactive oxygen species. But when you stress a cell and therefore the mitochondria, you can produce more reactive oxygen species than the glutathione and melatonin can manage. And at that point, if this molecule is present, it can hold on to those extra reactive oxygen species, preventing them from doing damage. So I have a fun analogy. It's Mardi Gras. You're on Bourbon Street, and these drunk reactive oxygen species are running around, smashing up cars and windows and causing all sorts of havoc. And the New Orleans Police Department, the glutathione and melatonin, come onto Bourbon Street, handcuff themselves to these reactive oxygen species, and get them off of Bourbon Street. But what do they do when the police get overwhelmed? They take these reactive oxygen species and they put them in a paddy wagon. They attach them to this ESS60 molecule so that they can't do any damage. And then when the glutathione and melatonin, the New Orleans Police Department, is replenished, they can come and handcuff themselves to these reactive oxygen species and get them off of Bourbon Street. And that's why we say this ESS60 molecule is the boss.
So that was a great analogy. One thing that has been going through my head, and so I'm not saying I'm an expert in even what I'm about to mention, I'm connecting this. You know how we all have like our little sub passions in this biohacking functional medicine world? I have a guess what yours is. Mine is circadian biology and light. I love that kind of stuff. I find it very fascinating. And one of the things that I came across when studying sunlight was this idea, I'm not saying it's proven, but this idea that vitamin C, you mentioned that, helps with the reactive oxygen species. Now, what's interesting is human beings are one of the only animals that we can't create like our own vitamin C, right? We kind of need to get it from our diet. So then you say, well, where are we getting it? Where does it come from? And if you look at the places that it comes from most, it has to do with like a crop or a fruit that would grow in strong sunlight. Now, what's fascinating about this is, and guys, we're going back thousands of years before the EMF, before the extra crap and pollution and all that stuff. What would have actually caused some of this damage if you were out excessively in sun? Yes, there could have been damage, but you also could have, in theory, healed from some of the stuff that you were eating. We also know, to kind of support this, it's different, but it does support the idea that our diet is based off sunlight. We know that we become more insulin sensitive when we're exposed to strong UV, which is fascinating because, as far as I'm concerned, the only idea I could come up with that is like to why we would be more insulin sensitive with sunlight is because our body understands that that thing somehow is going to grow these more crops which have higher carbohydrate counts, which is beyond fascinating to think about that that's all connected in such a way. Separate podcast. But I'm thinking about this. So, if we go back 2,000 years, maybe we had minor damages or minor insults, and, the minimal amount of vitamin C that we would have gotten from something like fruit back then would have been enough to help. But what's happening today, I think, to so many of us is the bombardment is so strong. And then not to mention, if you look at something like the sun, as much as I'm a supporter of the sun, you should get out in it. But if that can damage us in some way, All the sun is part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And then I think about, well, look at what I'm talking to you on. Unfortunately, as much as I'm blessed to be in this nice apartment with my wife right now, we are in an apartment. There's Wi-Fi, there's 5G, there's all these things. I kind of wonder sometimes the idea that the electromagnetic spectrum or parts of the electromagnetic spectrum can cause damage is not a theory. That's proven. How far that goes, I don't know. That's above my pay grade. And I sometimes wonder, artificial lights, 5G, the Wi-Fi router, all that stuff, is that not creating more insult? And then if something like this is, for very lack of better words, a vitamin C on steroids in terms of dealing with some of this reactive oxygen species, I mean, maybe it's an antidote to some of the stuff that's happening in today's world, or at least an antidote is probably rich, but a great supporter of dealing with some of the stressors of today's world. So now that I've gotten these crazy thoughts and connections out, does this make sense at all, or do I need to shut up?
No. So I, by the way, I love going back and trying like, hey, like maybe it's because of this, and I've got some complicated ones myself, and maybe that is for another podcast or just a beer. Yeah. So when you started talking about radiation, there's actually peer-reviewed published research that shows this molecule to have protective effects on radiation, right? So you're swinging at the right strike, right? I do want to add, because I don't think I've said this yet, because I think this also goes to your story, that the molecule is actually a naturally occurring molecule. So I was brought on to help build the reactor, and we still use that design today. But the molecule, if you collect the soot from a candle, right, and you normally do that by putting a cold steel plate above the candle, that black soot will have parts per million or parts per billion of this ESS60 molecule. It's just not enough to put in any sort of supplement that would have, be efficacious. But I say that because we have literally all been exposed to this molecule. It just took us a long time to actually discover it.
Okay, so then in terms of getting this now, you mentioned the thing about olive oil. So how is this administered? How much do I have to take per day? Is it multiple times a day? Is it even every day? Like, I would love to know more about this.
Yeah, so we typically recommend that you take a teaspoon, which is 5 mils per day in the morning. We have a very small amount of people who, if they take it later in the day, they'll report that it keeps them up. That's not the case for me, but I'm also the guy who can drink a cup of coffee and go to sleep. Now, I know it's messing up my sleep. I don't need any of your team to tell me that is messing up my sleep, but I can fall asleep. And again, that goes to the most consistent testimonial of people taking it in the morning, reporting mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. This is just one of our boxes. This is a 4 ounce, and it has about 24 servings in it. I actually take quite a bit more, when you have access and, you're a biohacker, you tend to do more, right? And so my routine is I do kind of a bulletproof coffee kind of thing. I use our MCT we have three oils: olive oil, avocado oil, and MCT oil. So I put our MCT in my coffee. I skip the ghee. I don't want all those extra calories. But while that's blending, I take about 1.5 teaspoons of our olive oil product. And then, so that's how I start my day. I'll often squeeze in some avocado onto my salad for lunch, but that's kind of my routine.
Okay. Guys, we are at the 30-minute mark, actually a little past it. So if you have questions for Chris, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We'd be happy to do them live with you guys. If it's your first time, we always try to do this right around this mark. I love hearing from you. The guests love hearing from you. So they don't bite, I promise. My next question is, though, and I know how impossibly hard these things are, so I feel like I know the answer, but I gotta ask. Are there any human studies being pursued with this or different dosages? I'd love to know that.
I'll be honest, there are some companies in this space. None of them are doing research except for us, right? When you go back and look at the original study, my lab provided the material. And that's the study that extended the lives by 90%. My lab provided the material. My lab is actually mentioned in that original study. So we've been with this molecule. We're the oldest and longest manufacturers of the molecule on the planet. And I've lost my train of thought.
Well, I was just asking if there was any human studies being done. It's all good.
And so the human studies are probably going to come from us. I can tell you, we've already done a 10-person sleep study. kind of an interesting story. I ended up, I was on a podcast and they introduced me to a Professor Smar. He actually is out of the University of California, San Diego, and was a consultant for Oura Ring at the time. And I haven't contacted him in a while, but we were putting together a study where we could get access to the Oura Ring data. And, I was really excited about it. But that was right when the pandemic hit. And it turns out the Oura Ring's pretty good at identifying COVID. As long as you have a baseline of temperature data, it can identify really any sort of sickness. So he basically disappeared, but we decided to continue on the study. What we did is we asked survey questions of how hard was it to fall asleep? How restless was your sleep? How good was your sleep? And how did you feel in the morning? We asked those questions for 10 days before people tried our product, 10 days on the product, 10 days off the product, and then 10 days back on the product. 100% of those participants reported an improvement in sleep. I'm kind of excited about this. Our next thing that we'll be doing is related to HSCRP, C-reactive protein, an inflammatory marker. At this last conference, we were at A4M. We had a booth. I think you guys might have been there. We were at A4M Longevity Fest, and I had this doctor come up to me. He said, I met you at the biohacking conference, Dave Asprey's biohacking conference. I've been giving your product to a bunch of my patients. And I can tell you this, by the way, I have this a video of this because I was so excited about it. He said, I don't care if you're man, woman, pre-surgery, post-surgery, if you're cardiovascular disease, cancer, arthritis, it doesn't matter. Your product dramatically reduces HSCRP within 4 to 6 weeks. And so HSCRP is a pretty inexpensive test. I literally just got my test yesterday. Now I'm stuck at home, so I don't get to do it. But it's a fairly inexpensive test. So our next thing that we're just going to do is some ad hoc studies of like, hey, what's your HSCRP before you try the product? And then what is it 8 weeks later? And so we're excited about doing that.
I appreciate your effort into even trying to do it, because the bottom line is you could keep marketing this stuff and branding it and just doing whatever you want. Guys, I don't think people realize how hard it is to get the groups together, to get these studies going. And I mean, 10 people is hard enough to get them organized, let alone when you're starting to talk about 100 or 1,000. It's like, so who's funding it? You going to pay for all of it? The company's going to pay for all of it? Is it going to be outside people? Like, it's a lot more complicated than people think. And then not to mention, are they being compliant? Are they making 100 other changes at the same time? And now they're just adding this in as the 100th thing. So these things, especially in the world of supplements, food, all that, is very tough. So I commend anyone that's actually trying to do it. And I like that, in a sense, I like that you're taking a higher dosage than maybe you would recommend or typically have on the bottle, because this is the way I look at it, man. I went from functional medicine first. I definitely resonate with the biohacking space in many ways now, not everything, but in a lot of ways. And the way I see this is, in 40, 50 years, we're all either going to be laughing and be like, yeah, we were right, or this is going to be an experiment that we get laughed at for. So I'm hoping it's the first option there, and we're around to tell our tales, because some of us get a little nutty, and if you looked at our cabinets and all the technology that we're using and all that, it can be a lot, but it's fun. And I think there's worse passions to have, right?
In terms of dosing, I can absolutely, like, either we're going to be laughing or somebody's going to be laughing at us. In terms of dosing, there's something that I'd like to share. We actually have and he worked the booth with us because he loves our product so much. Of course, we pay him, but he also loves our product so much. His name is Anthony Kunkel. He's a 2-time U.S. ultra running champion. So right now, he's running 120 miles per week. He is pushing the body to the human limits of whatever exhaustion you can do. Loves our product. And our first conversation, I'll never forget it because it was a spectacular conversation. He said, I started your product and I was taking 1 serving and I didn't really notice anything. And then I tripled the dose and I was like, wow, this could be the difference between somebody having running as a hobby and somebody having running as a career. And the way he puts it is, I don't think it speeds recovery. And if you think about our proposed method of action inside, the boss theory inside the mitochondria, he says, I don't believe it speeds recovery, because that would mean my 10-day recovery happens in 5 days. It actually prevents damage in the first place. He says, And the way I picture this is on the last 5 miles of a 50-mile run. By the way, I don't hear that phrase very often, where strength and stability were previously a problem. They're just not a problem anymore. And so I think that can give you some ideas about dosing. I have had people call me, and I'm sure you guys get calls like, I've got this serious condition. What would you recommend? It was like, I cannot make any promises, but I'd probably be taking 2 to 3 tablespoons if I was trying to address that particular condition.
That's a really interesting it's an anecdote to it, right? That the fact that he feels stronger and better on those end parts of the run. And I wouldn't even have thought of that initially, I guess, unless I was doing it myself. But that is a significant difference between just speeding up recovery versus the damage might not have happened in the first place. Both are cool in their own ways, but I would say there's plenty of things that speed up recovery. I don't know as many things that would, in theory, not create the damage to begin with, especially, I mean, those levels of athletes are just nuts. I do a heck of a lot, but that's a different level of dedication to your sport. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a next level.
Yes. So one of the things I want to ask, and there are occasionally, supplements or products that we would feel safe saying, hey, maybe this is for everyone. But as FDNs, the thing that we preach from the beginning of the course is test, don't guess. Everyone's bio-individual, and that one person's like perfect protocol could be another person's like worst protocol. So everything is self-titration. We make sure even the dosages of supplements are different for each person. We don't care what's on the bottle necessarily. We actually help them scale it up. I am curious, at this time, do you have any, despite no side effects, do you have any reason to believe that this would be maybe not good for someone on this type of medication or during this phase of their life? Or as far as you're concerned, does this seem to be of benefit to almost anyone who would take it, no matter where they're at?
Yeah, part of me wants to say, yeah, here's that, because it would give me more credible. Like, here's this narrow credibility. Here's this narrow band of people like maybe who shouldn't take it. Well, I'll say this: it's too early. If you're pregnant, thinking of getting pregnant, or nursing, or a child, you should not take this yet. Right now, I'll share. I'm comfortable giving it to my kids because I have access to the data. But the recommendation is that you don't do that, because it's just too early, right? That's too formative of a time period, and something this early should not be consumed at that point. Other than that, you would want to go, okay, well, anybody who might have a problem with olive oil, I think that's extremely, extremely rare. We also do have other oil. I did actually bump into one person who was allergic to olive oil and MCT, which I found fascinating, right? MCT is just such a small fraction of either a coconut oil or a palm oil. So he ended up having to try the avocado. But if you're that would be the concern that I would have. If you're nursing, thinking about getting pregnant, a young child, or have some concerns with the oils, then that would be problematic.
Yeah, that's fair. So then that, I guess this would also mean, I'm sorry to keep pressing. I'm just, for the sake of, because I know our practitioners buy stuff. And so I just want to make sure that they know what to do. There's nothing here, or let me ask, is there anything here that could create a detoxification effect? Because some of our people, remember, we're kind of different than biohacking in the sense that we're more functional medicine. So it is almost universal that the people that go into our course are quite sick. It's not everyone, but 90%, I mean, they might have multiple different diagnoses. Some of them couldn't work. So you give them a supplement that is maybe perfect for you and I at this point in our life and our health. And the next day they're sick as a dog just because it is working and it's moving stuff and their body can't handle that. Would this apply to something like this, or is that not the same thing? I'm almost thinking it might not be, because it seems to be making you stronger, like the runner brought up.
Yeah, we have had some small amount of testimonials where kind of, and one of them is just attributable to oil, right? If you're not used to taking a teaspoon of oil, you can end up with some looser stool. So it's not loose stool, but looser stool. That's obviously something that will happen, and that can be 3 days, like you're back to normal. And we have had some people kind of report, hey, I was not feeling well for some period of time. So it seemed like they might have been having some sort of a response, right? Some sort of detoxification response. But that is not a consistent testimonial. There is some reasons to believe that this molecule can do a good job of actually detoxifying. One of the things that's true of a lot of detox components, a lot of detox supplements or whatever product that you might use, is they usually don't pass the gut barrier, right? So if you've got something that's in your bloodstream, what is it that you do to really manage stuff that's actually in your biology? We know this gets into your biology, and we know that it can hold negatively charged particles on the exterior. We know that we actually gave some raw material to the University of Houston along, this is probably 28 years ago, and they said that that material was performed as well as activated charcoal, right? Activated charcoal is a great detoxifier. Again, it doesn't get in past your gut barrier. Hopefully it shouldn't be. And so this is something that could potentially act like activated charcoal, but actually be in your bloodstream.
Thanks, Chris. We do have a question that just came in, so I'm just going to jump to that rather than responding since we only have about several minutes left. Miffed Microbiologist. Okay, interesting YouTube name. Has the avocado oil been packaged in plastic in any time of manufacturing? Oils tend to pull out nasty chemicals from plastic. See, these are the things our audience
Yeah, well, I'll give two things to that. One, I believe that they come in tin cans. We don't have plastic bottles lying around, but I don't know that for sure. So I can, if you hit me up, follow me on Instagram, MyVitalC, C as in carbon, and then I can follow up with you and double check. A lot of people ask, like, what should I be taking, right? We've got olive oil, avocado oil, and MCT oil. And we actually recommend the olive oil for two reasons. The first is we're a science-based organization, and all the research is on this ESS60 molecule in olive oil, right? So that's why that's the first reason we recommend. The next is you actually get a higher concentration of the ESS60 molecule in olive oil versus avocado or MCT. Just to give you the numbers, it's about 0.8 milligrams per milliliter in olive oil, about 0.6 in avocado oil, and about 0.3 in MCT. So, if you're asking what should you try, we would always recommend the olive oil.
Thanks, Chris. All right. As we kind of wrap up here, of course, the last question will be where people can find you. I just have one more, though. This is something that I like to ask if it's a practitioner that works with clients or there is a product that has, pretty profound effects in and of itself. So maybe we've already shared it. If we did, it could be the runner, it could be someone else. I'd love to know, out of the years that you've been doing this, what is the call that you got or the person that you met where their results were just like the most stunning to you or like the coolest to you, where it really helped transform their health? So I'll give you a second, but I don't know if there's anything that kind of stands out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number. So here's the one that probably stands out. Assume this will not happen for you, right? Because FDA disclaimer. We got a video testimonial from a lady who almost cried twice, right? Like, it just doesn't get more impactful than that. And what she shared with is that she had been struggling with insomnia for a long time and had visited lots of doctors and just wasn't solving it. And that she had finally taken, she was, I think, just an influencer, and we had just sent her some product and it helped her sleep. And the way she described it is like, my significant other is getting to know me again, right? Because if you're not getting sleep, everything's a disaster, right? Your health is a disaster. Your emotional responses are like, everything's a disaster. And so she was just in tears, thankful that she was able to get back to herself and be that person there for her partner that she was prior to really experiencing the insomnia. That's probably the most powerful one. If it's okay, I can share the worst one.
Always happens. I already know where we're going. Please do.
So we got our largest distributor here in Houston. Her name is Gwen, and so interestingly, she initially purchased the product for her dog. She had no intention to take it herself. She purchased it for her dog and sees such a profound difference in her dog that she decided that she wanted to take it. Now, that's pretty spectacular. What I like to point out about that, this is new, right? And I'm a supplement guy. I didn't want to be here, but I am. And so part of you and your audience has to be going, is this just placebo effect? There is no placebo effect with pets. Ironically, they're not smart enough to convince themselves that they had their little dropper of oil that morning and now they're going to run around with the zoomies, right? So she noticed this profound difference. And I did an interview with her. And she said this, if you had asked me at the 3-month mark, have I noticed anything? My initial response would have been no. But I kind of slowed down and I took stock of my life. I'm working a little bit later. I'm waking up earlier, which I was never a morning person. And then arguably the worst testimonial about a supplement ever, I cleaned my garage. We don't use that in any marketing material, but it does actually mean something, right? Like a garage, it's either a big endeavor, maybe there's some emotional baggage that's in the garage. And so having that extra boost of energy because you got better sleep, and I'll share this one too. We'll get your garage clean. My business coach, he says that for 50 years, he needed an alarm clock to wake up. When he's taking MyVitalC, he wakes up before the alarm clock gets him up. Now, he's a business guy, right? He has to go out networking. So he's having glasses of wine or late nights sometimes. And it just doesn't matter if it's a lot of sleep, a little sleep. He wakes up before the alarm clock unless he runs out, which he does every now and then. And then it's about 10 days and he needs the alarm clock. And then he gets the product and he's back to not needing the alarm clock. And I think that's pretty profound. And I'll throw this one last one because I mentioned he's out networking. We have had a number of people say that they have imbibed too much and not felt the repercussions the next day. So we do have one kind of box that's labeled. It's the same product. It's called Party Recovery. And that testimonial is pretty consistent.
Very cool. Chris, this has been awesome. I really, seriously, you're like the perfect person to represent something like this, because do I think there's going to be more science that shows more benefit of this? I do. That's just my gut feeling and my hunch. And based on what you said, it makes sense to me. I love people that can come on though and, allow for, I'm not a mean guy, but just some challenging questions or some pushback on certain things. Just be like, yeah, that's just how we get to the bottom of things. It's how you have a good discussion and quite frankly, a good podcast. So where can people find you? Where can they get this product? I'm down to try it myself because I'm like, well, can't be anything worse than what I put in my body in my teenage years. So I'm definitely down. Always try anything. So where can we find you?
Yeah. So we've made a URL specifically for your audience, myvitalc.com/HDP, right? Health Detective Podcast. And they can find a coupon code for $15 off when they get there. That code is on that webpage. And so that's MyVitalC, C as in carbon.com/HDP. And I'm going to share, when you go there, you can find our product. Again, we would recommend the olive oil, kind of covered why that. You can get on subscription. We actually have a 25% discount to go on subscription. If you're just going to try it once, go ahead and go on subscription. Our customer service team has, it's probably 1,000 now, 5-star reviews on Google. They're not trained to talk you out of it. They're trained to help you. Also, if you have questions, our staff really does kind of listen to the podcast, understand the technology that's behind this so they can answer a lot of your questions. If you could do me a small favor and then go to my Instagram and go to MyVitalC and follow, that's where I post clips from my podcast. The podcast is called Live Beyond the Norms. So I'm constantly releasing good information. I really have the mindset of let me deliver as much value as possible. I really don't talk about our products that much on our social media. I talk about, good health, good nutrition, good exercise, good movement, and share that from the experts that I've had the opportunity to interview.
Awesome. And guys, I say this every single time. I wish for podcasts to be like the new TV. It's like, you don't just watch one show. You maybe have a favorite show, but you check out others. So, and Reed promotes this too, which I love. Like, go check out Chris's show. We'd love for you to get information there. It's not a monopoly on this stuff. And then hopefully you still come back to us. That'd be good too. So
I do have one more thing, if I could, right?
Yeah.
So I wrote this book, which is really the whole story, Live Longer and Better. You can buy it on Amazon, or you can buy it on our website for $20. If you buy it on our website, you can pay $10 to have me sign it. 100% of that $10 signature fee goes to Operation Underground Railroad. You may remember the movie Sound of Freedom.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes. So that's 100% of the signature fees go to Operation. I was lucky. I got to see him speak before I think the week before the movie came out, saw the movie, tearjerker, horrible situation, but he's doing the horrible work to fix it. And so it all goes to Operation Underground Railroad.
That is awesome, man. Yeah. You got, there's a lot of people in our audience that support this. So let's just put it that way. That's great.
Awesome.
Chris, I have one final question for you. It might be about the product. That's fine. But I always like to throw it out there anyway, just because I never know what people are going to answer with. Signature question for today to finish up is, we give you a magic wand. You can wave it and you get all of our viewers and listeners to do just one thing for their health. So they can start doing one thing, or you can get them to stop doing one thing. What's the one thing that Chris gets them to do, biased or not?
Change mindset. And the reason I say that, so I did a longevity summit uncovering the secrets of longevity, interviewed 55 experts, including some really phenomenal people that I didn't know I would be able to get on there, like Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, Dr. Stephen Gundry, pretty amazing. And we actually, yes, we do ship internationally. And I asked every one of those guests, what are some tips and tricks that you would give to me, or to our audience, for living, a longer and healthier life. And they talked about exercise, nutrition, and mindset, and sleep and mindset. But sleep was like 33.3% and mindset was 49. I was like, I think they got this wrong. Like, Detective Ed, you know how important sleep is. I know how important sleep is. How could it be so low? And then I kind of thought about it for a couple of days, and I said, wait a minute. If you know you need to change your sleep and you don't have the mindset to make that change, if you know you need to change your nutrition and you don't have that mindset, if you know you need to change your exercise and you don't have that mindset, it's not going to happen. The thing that I would do is, here's the mindset to get healthy and, have a fantastic life.
That's so relevant, so perfect. I always say, like, for people that are, especially with these extreme health challenges, you do not get to the other side of that without becoming a different person. This is a personal development journey disguised through health issues. And there is no one that gets on this show that had an autoimmune disease and that was in remission with this for years that says that they are the same individual then that they are now, and it's not just because of the health. So I love that, and thank you for giving a not biased answer, or not giving the easy answer. I appreciate that. Chris, I'm looking forward to meeting you. I guess we only have a month before that'll happen. So excited that you're going to be there, and thank you for coming on today and for the work that you're doing.